gentlemen, please remain standing for prayers from Reverend Tim.
Let's pray together. Father God, you are the giver of all good things. We thank you for the gift of life and health and for all other blessings that you have given to us. We give you thanks for our Mayor, Carol, and for all other councillors. We thank you for their service of you and others as they seek the best for all of us. We thank you, God, that you call people into positions of power and influence. We pray for each of us that you would give us the grace so to use the power and influence that you have entrusted to us for the good of others and the benefits of the communities which we serve. Bless this council, I pray, that all of their conversations, all of their deliberations, and all of their decisions would be full of your wisdom. Bless each councillor with your guidance, your courage and your strength as they seek to play their part in tonight's meeting. Finally, dear God, grant us all the humility to seek your will and your ways in all that we do and say, now and always. For we ask it all in the name of Jesus, that we may see God's kingdom come and his will being done on earth as it is in heaven. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Tim. Please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have apologies from Councillors East, Flynn, Gardner, Jarjusi, Kashid, Akmar and Markham.
Thank you. Now, can we receive the minutes of the last meeting of Council, 18th of January 2018? Are they agreed? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest in tonight's agenda? No. Right, now we come to my announcements. Firstly, I'd like to welcome the Brunel students who are with us this evening. Thank you for coming. We have again been extremely busy over the last few weeks and are now 9 months into the year and have attended 416 events and meetings. It's really interesting how different and varied they are. On the 22nd of January, we attended the Holocaust Memorial Day ceremony at City Hall. The theme this year was the power of words, and we heard from a World War II Holocaust survivor of his experiences, also a survivor of the atrocities in Bosnia and Serbia. There were also some very thought-provoking poems, a very poignant and moving ceremony. Then, a couple of weeks ago, we invited 2 very special residents of the borough to the parlour. A lovely 97-year-old lady, Connie Evans, who was a gunner during World War II. And she told us all about it. About her time in the forces. She was an amazing and a real stalwart of a number of bodies, including the Older Persons Assembly, Community Voice, and was chairman of Oak Farm Residents Association for over 40 years. With a number of her friends and Boris Johnson and the leader of the council, we gave her a farewell tea, as she has now moved into the Chelsea Pensioners' Home. And knowing Connie, she will certainly be organising everyone there fairly soon. Also, a great gentleman, John Thurkettle, with his family and friends, the leader of the council and I had the privilege of presenting the Civic Medal to John for his amazing 30 years of volunteering work within the borough. And I have received a lovely letter from him, which hopefully I've got with me, yes, and I would like to read. It says, "Dear Madam Mayor, I wish to thank you formally for the presentation of my Civic Award last Thursday and for inviting my family, friends and colleagues to such a delightful event. The buffet lunch was superb and the mix of formal and informal perfect. I know I can speak for all in saying it was enjoyed by everyone. It is difficult to describe how honoured I feel, but it is a truly wonderful finale to the 30 years of volunteering in the borough that I consider second to none. Yours sincerely, John Sirkettle." We have also done 12 groundbreaking and ribbon-cutting events for the creating of outside gyms and refurbished play parks within the borough. These will be great for the health and well-being of our residents and their children. So, as I said, a very varied schedule. My Thanksgiving service on Sunday the 4th of February was really blessed occasion, with a number of mayors from across London attending. The service was lovely, and Holy Trinity Church of England Primary School Choir sang 2 lovely songs beautifully. Everyone really enjoyed the afternoon. Thank you to everyone who attended our last quiz night, despite the change of the date. It was another successful evening, raising a good amount for my charities. And once again, Barclays matched all monies raised. The next quiz is on Wednesday, the 14th of March. I and the students of Uxbridge are delighted that the Murder Mystery Supper on the 1st of March is now fully booked and sold out. Finally, the Deputy Mayor has agreed to do the 2018 annual London Mayor's Walk for me. Thank you, John. As unfortunately I'm unable to walk long distances. However, I will be joining him at strategic points along the way. The event covers the walk of Dick Whittington over 600 years ago. It starts at Whittington Hospital and finishes 5 miles later at the Mansion House. It would be great if you could help us raise monies for my charities by sponsoring John and myself. We will put some forms, etc., in the group offices. I would also like to thank Councillor Lewis for persuading the prestigious Holland Shooting Club to organise a fundraising clay pigeon shooting day with breakfast and lunch to raise funds for my charity. That's the end of my announcements. So the next item on the agenda is the report of the Head of Democratic Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just before you call on Councillor Puddifoot, I'd just like to refer back to the item on apologies. I gave Councillor Flynn's apologies. The more observant of you will notice that Councillor Flynn is actually here and should in no way be mistaken for Councillor Fife, whose apologies I should have given and is next on the list. On this item, I'd just like to point out the additional item which the Mayor has approved being placed on the agenda at the bottom of page 2 on the order papers, the waiver of the 6-month councillor attendance rule.
Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are 3 matters covered by this report. The first is to note the recommendations approved using urgency provisions since the last meeting of Council, and these are detailed in the report. The second is to approve the Members' Allowances Scheme, as detailed in the order of business. The third is to approve a waiver of the 6-month councillor attendance rule in the case of Councillor Fode Jarjusi of Botwell Ward. As I'm sure all members are aware, Fode has unfortunately experienced some serious health problems which have affected his ability to attend council or committee meetings. Madam Mayor, I move the first and the third item en bloc.
Is that seconded?
I formally second, Madam Mayor, and reserve my right.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to thank the leader and deputy leader for bringing forward this waiver. Fode Judges is a very valued member of the Council Chamber. We do send him our very best wishes for a full recovery to good health.
Hear, hear.
Thank you very much.
Is that agreed? Councillor Puddifoot.
Madam Mayor, the independent panel that reviews councillors' basic and responsibility allowances reports every 4 years and has recently published its recommendation for the year 2018-19. As regards the basic allowance, the panel has recommended a sum of £11,045, recognising that this is somewhat below the level of basic allowance paid elsewhere in the country, but feeling that it would be inappropriate to recommend an increase beyond the annual updating in line with staff pay awards. The Hillingdon scheme recommends £11,036.71p. The starting point for special responsibility allowances is the amount recommended for the Leader of the Council, with all other allowances as a percentage of that sum. 4 years ago, the panel suggested that leaders of London boroughs should be paid an amount broadly equivalent to that paid to a backbench MP, being £67,060, and recommended the sum of £65,472. Shortly thereafter, MPs, not having the same level of restraint as councillors, increased their salary to £76,011, plus a pension and a termination payment. Accordingly, the panel, whilst they still feel the allowance should be the same as an MP, recommending allowance of £57,085. The Hillingdon figure is £54,910.84. Madam Mayor, whilst since the introduction of a recorded vote, the Labour Group have behaved responsibility as regards this matter, for the benefit of the Brunel students here tonight, let me explain that we make the Labour Group vote for their own special responsibility allowances and effectively take that responsibility. Madam Mayor, I formally move recommendation 2A relating to the current member allowance scheme and special responsibility allowances numbered 1 to 16 as shown in the order of business, and we will request a recorded vote.
Is that seconded?
Madam Mayor, I second and record, reserve my right.
Are there any other speakers? No? So
That being the case, Madam Mayor, we move to a recorded vote. For clarification, this is on item 5, little 2, recommendation A or 1, and it's the level of basic allowance and special responsibility allowances 1 to 16 as shown on the table at the top of page 2. Please indicate if you're voting for, against or abstaining. Councillor Ahmad Walana. Councillor Allen.
abstain?
Councillor Barnes. Councillor Bianco. Councillor Birra. Councillor Bridges. Councillor Burles. Councillor Burrows. Councillor Chamdell. Councillor Chapman. Councillor G. Cooper. Councillor J. Cooper. Councillor Cawthorne. Councillor Crowe. Councillor Curling. Councillor Dan. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dia. Councillor Dillon. Councillor Dott. Councillor Deducci. Councillor Duncan. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Eginton. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garg. Councillor Gillam. Councillor Graham. Councillor Hagger. Councillor Hensley. Councillor Higgins. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Kaufman. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Catra. Councillor Lavery. Councillor Lewis. Councillor D. Mills. Councillor R. Mills. Councillor Money. Councillor Morse. Councillor Nelson. Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Oswell. Councillor Palmer. Councillor Puddifoot. Councillor Riley. Councillor Sansapuri. Councillor Seaman Digby. Councillor Simmons. Councillor Singh. Councillor Stead. Councillor Sweeting. Councillor White. Councillor Yarrow. Mr. Deputy Mayor. Madam Mayor.
For.
Madam Mayor, that is carried by 40 votes to 0.
Councillor Puddifoot.
Madam Mayor, I now formally move the adoption of responsibility allowance numbers 17 to 21 as shown in recommendation 2B on the order of business, and we will request a recorded vote.
Yeah. Seconder.
And Madam Mayor, I formally second and once again reserve my right.
Councillor Kearney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me. I would just like to say that the increase that we will receive, we will be donating, as in other years, to local charities. Previously, we've donated to the former Mayor's charity. We have an ongoing commitment to Hillingdon Food Bank, and our increase will be donated to another local charity. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kearney.
Speakers, no? There being no other speakers, Madam Mayor, a recorded vote has been requested again. This is on B. This is the Special Responsibility Allowances 17 to 21. Please indicate for, against or abstain. Councillor Ahmad Walana? Abstain. Councillor Allen? Councillor Barnes? Councillor Bianco? Councillor Birra? Councillor Bridges? Councillor Burles? Councillor Burrows? Councillor Chamdell? Councillor Chapman? Councillor G. Cooper? Councillor J. Cooper? Councillor Cawthorne? Councillor Crowe? Councillor Curling? Councillor Dan? Councillor Davis? Councillor Dennis? Councillor Deere? Councillor Dillon? Councillor Dott? Councillor Duducu? Councillor Duncan? Councillor Edwards? Councillor Eginton? Councillor Flynn? Councillor Garg? Councillor Gillam? Councillor Graham? Councillor Hagger? Councillor Hensley? Councillor Higgins? Councillor Jackson? Councillor Kaufman? Councillor Kelly? Councillor Catra? Councillor Lavery? Councillor Lewis? Councillor D. Mills? Councillor R. Mills? Councillor Money? Councillor Morse? Councillor Nelson? Councillor O'Brien? Councillor Oswell? Councillor Palmer? Councillor Puddifoot? Councillor Riley? Councillor Sansapuri? Councillor Seaman Digby? Councillor Simmons? Councillor Singh? Councillor Stead? Councillor Sweeting? Councillor White? Councillor Yarrow? Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Abstain.
Madam Mayor?
Abstain.
Madam Mayor, that's carried by 18 votes to 0.
Thank you. So we then move on to, we now move on to item 6 on the agenda, request for the suspension of council procedure 14.4. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to move the suspension of Council Procedure Rules 14.4 to allow unlimited speaking time for the mover and seconder of the motion and the principal speaker and seconder of the principal amendment from the Labour Group. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Have we got a seconder? Thank you. Is that agreed? Right, Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, it is again with great pleasure that I stand tonight to announce this administration's budget for the year 2018-2019. In such an important year for this council, and particularly for the residents of this great borough of ours, it is essential that what I say tonight is heard across every part of our borough, from Hayes to Harefield, from Northwood to West Drayton, from Heathrow villages to Ickenham. Important choices are going to be made this year which could affect the future of our residents, choices which I firmly believe will be made easier with the benefit of what I'm going to say over the next few minutes. Madam Mayor, over the course of my speech I will tell you what we plan for the next year more, and I will also look back to some degree to bring context and to let people see for themselves the continuity that we, this Conservative administration, have brought to the running of our borough. If I had been looking for a subtitle for my speech, it would have been Continuing to Build on Firm Foundations. Some of you may recall, Madam Mayor, last year I reflected on the lack of involvement of one of the borough's 3 MPs in the formulation of that budget. I felt at the time bereft, well perhaps only slightly disappointed, not to have enjoyed the benefit of any pearls of wisdom that the Shadow Chancellor could have bestowed upon us. His knowledge then and the recommendations he might have made, had we listened to them, would have surely seen us safely on the road to rack and ruin by now. A place I'm pleased to report we have once again skillfully avoided. Madam Mayor, you can rest easy tonight. You will be able to go home after this meeting and enjoy a good night's peaceful sleep, as can all our residents, and even the opposition sat across the aisle to your left, safe in the knowledge that the Borough of Hillingdon is in excellent financial health, having delivered all the promises made to our residents in the last year, and even back over the last 4 years and more. What I will set out tonight, continuing to build on firm foundations, is a balanced, carefully thought out, financially resilient budget that will continue to deliver to the residents of Hillingdon the services and functions that they have rightly come to expect from us, and which are the envy of nearly every other authority in the land, and certainly all those shaded red. I will demonstrate tonight once again that we have delivered, are delivering, and will continue to deliver for this community in the year ahead. With such a wealth of important information to pass on to you tonight, it is difficult to know where to start, but I will start by setting some context to show where we sit when compared to others around us, and thus demonstrate clearly to all just what a careless or perhaps thoughtless slip of the pencil could undo, just what degree of good work could be undone if our achievements and promises are ignored in the coming months. Madam Mayor, whilst I have not yet revealed for certain what increase will apply in Hillingdon to our council tax, I am sure many of you can guess. If you are unfortunate enough to live in Ealing, you will be facing an increase of 5.99%, including the social care precept. In Hounslow, a 4% rise. In Harrow, a 3.49% rise. And in Brent, a 3.99% rise, just to pick a few examples from our Labour neighbours. Even in Hammersmith and Fulham, where they have announced a freeze this year, they have increased their fees and charges by 3.9%, almost across the board. What is perhaps more significant is that all these boroughs have band-D rates above ours, so it is true to say that not only do you have to pay more to live in one of our neighbouring boroughs, but you get less in return. No free 30-minute on-street parking, no brown badge scheme, no free swimming for the over 65s, no free allotments for the over 65s, no free garden waste scheme, and for the privilege of paying more council tax, you also get to pay for your garden waste to be collected, £75 a year in Ealing and Hounslow, £60 in Brent, and £50 in Harrow. You get to pay 5 times more for your disabled blue badge in Harrow than you do in Hillingdon. That's caring for the less able. Well done, Harrow. You get to pay 13% more for your residence parking permit in Hounslow, an eye-watering 33% more in Ealing. That's £98. Harrow, which also charges more than us, has been modest this year and only put the charge up by 7%. Returning to the subject of waste, Harrow have increased the cost of their bulky goods collection service by 17%, meaning that you would be charged £75 to have 12 items collected. In Ealing, there is a minimum charge of £40, and in Hounslow, it's worse, it's £50. Madam Mayor, even in the happiest times of your life, you are better off in Hillingdon. Not only is it cheaper to get married here than it is in either Ealing or Harrow, but Harrow have just introduced a wedding stealth tax by increasing their charges by 36%. Madam Mayor, I could go on and on and on. And as I have unlimited time, it's very tempting. The list is almost endless, but remembering my theme, continuing to build on firm foundations, I thought now would be a good time to remind some of our colleagues, and of course not forgetting those watching us on YouTube, of some of our recent achievements from which we can proudly move forward this year. Madam Mayor, did you know that over the last 4 years we have resurfaced more than 681 roads? That figure is almost certainly more roads than all the boroughs in West London put together. We have resurfaced 71 pavements, the beginning of a much bigger programme. We have installed nearly 8,500 burglar alarms for our older residents. This makes them more secure in their homes and fights both crime and the perception of crime across the borough. Did you know that we have installed alarms in Botwell, 357 of them, Townfield, 247 of them, Pinkwell, 289 of them, as well as in Ickenham, Northwood, Harefield and every other ward in the borough. Only this council has initiated a scheme providing funds to every ward councillor, no matter which party they represent. The ward budget initiative has invested more than £500,000 over the last 4 years into our communities, funding 310 projects. And this is on top of the Chrysalis programme, where over the last 4 years we have invested more than £4.3 million in 82 environmental improvement projects, all for the benefit of our residents. Earlier, I mentioned that we alone provided a brown badge parking scheme for our over 65s. More than 7,400 brown badges have been distributed in the last 4 years. If these aren't all examples of putting our residents first, then I don't know what is. If all these achievements, all made to improve the lives of our residents, don't set us apart from the mediocrity of the boroughs around us and tell the story of a well-run, financially prudent borough, then there is only one thing we can really do, and that is to up our game and carry on rolling out these schemes in the year ahead. Madam Mayor, the setting of the council tax rate used to be a well-kept secret, unveiled on the night to much acclaim or criticism. Now the figure is well known in advance. It is no surprise, therefore, when I confirm to you that this year, just as has been the case for the last 10 years, there will be no increase in council tax at the Hillingdon level. And if that wasn't enough, for those who are over 65 years of age, the freeze will continue for the 12th year. Whilst these figures are not a surprise, the achievement, in face of ever-reduced central government support, is one that should be celebrated. It is, to use the familiar phrase, a good news story. What is not such a good news is the increase this year in the precept from the Mayor of London. I warned last year that electing a Labour Mayor would be an expensive business, and Mr Khan has proved me right again. Last year, after 8 years during which the previous Mayor had reduced his precept by 6%, Mr Khan increased his precept by 1.2% or £4 at Band D, but this year the news is worse. The increase this year is 7.08% or £14.23 at Band D. It seems that he, like Ken Livingstone before him, cannot resist the temptation to grow his bureaucracy at our expense without providing anything worthwhile in return. And this from a mayor who I don't believe has actually come to Hillingdon yet during his term in office. Let us hope that Mr Khan is removed from office before his budget increases by more than the 152% that Ken Livingstone achieved in his term. Madam Mayor, as you will know by now, there is more to budget setting than simply announcing the figures. Continuing to build on firm foundations means that we have, yet again, an exciting list of new programmes, all aimed at enhancing the lives of our residents. Moreover, as hinted at earlier, we will also be continuing to fund a number of our existing and popular programmes, such as the Chrysalis Fund, where yet again we will invest £1 million this year. However, before outlining some of the new programmes we plan to implement this year, I will confirm that we have made allowances as usual for unexpected or uncertain expenditure with our Risk and Contingency Fund, providing £8.9 million, and also provision for inflation of almost £5.6 million, and at the same time have projected necessary savings of £7.6 million to balance the book. Within the 115 pages of close type that comprises this budget, in detail, there are many other aspects that I can dwell on at length. But with the aim of getting us all home at a reasonable hour, I will concentrate on the more important items and leave you to read the fine print for yourselves at your leisure. Madam Mayor, we have allocated 2.7 million to priority growth items. These include new spending of £1 million to meet the capital financing cost of our school's expansion programme, and as I have referred in past years, we have undertaken and are continuing to provide for the expanding school population within the borough, the largest programme in London, to ensure that every one of our children has a proper school place when they need it. We will invest 576,000 to support a new waste and recycling centre in the south of the borough. As mentioned, we will invest 84,000 in our bulky waste collection service, 250,000 to provide funding for the continued operation of Uxbridge Police Station, 200,000 for expanded youth provision, 200,000 to enhance our fraud protection, 360,000 to support our new museums and archive service, and 29,000 to support our anti-social behaviour team. Madam Mayor, 100 years ago, we saw the end of the Great War. As a commemoration to those who served and those who gave their lives for our freedom, we will provide a fund of 320,000 to fund bursaries to local children to help with the cost of university fees. Much talk has been had recently over the issue of disposable, but it would seem difficult to recycle, coffee cups. Coffee has been the phenomenon of the last few years, but until recently, very few of us, I believe, realised that the cups we drink the coffee out of are not easily recycled. Some 8 billion accumulate every year. We, in this authority, will invest 200,000 this year to facilitate recycling for these cups. Another recent hot topic has been the future of our early years centres. Whilst these centres are funded out of the dedicated schools grant, over which we have no control whatsoever, we will provide 122,000 to supplement the 200,000 already earmarked from unallocated youth priority growth to ensure the future provision of this service. I am sure that my colleague, Councillor Simmons, will expand on this issue when he speaks later. Indeed, on this and many other programmes I've mentioned or will do shortly, all my Cabinet colleagues will expand, giving more details later this evening. Turning now to fees and charges, I am pleased to confirm that, as before, we will be sticking to our previous policy of ensuring that our fees and charges are no higher than 90% of those of our neighbouring boroughs. Full details are set out in the appendices of the budget report. Madam Mayor, the other side to the revenue budget is the capital budget. The prime focus of this budget remains the schools programme, as it has done for some years. However, that does not mean we have no greater ambitions. Some programmes are self-financing, such as the lighting replacement programme already underway throughout the borough. We will recoup the cost of changing our streetlights to LED units within 3 years through the savings in electricity usage. Similar projects going forward are the new Woodside GP surgery, where we will recoup our costs of just under 2 million over time through rents received, and also the new housing company that we have recently formed to develop housing that the borough needs. New allocations to the programme will include a new swimming pool in the south of the borough at Useley West Drayton, where we estimate likely costs could reach 30 million, and also the reprovision of HOAC, the Hillingdon Outdoor Activity Centre, where we have successfully negotiated funding of 26.5 million from HS2 to relocate the centre from Harefield to Denham. There has been much talk in the press and locally, indeed in this chamber, about the terrible decision to close Uxbridge Police Station. As has previously stated, we have made the Metropolitan Police an offer to buy the station from them as a way of helping them out of their financial problems, and 5 million is available for this task should they decide to accept. Other expenditure is planned for our parks and open spaces. 258,000 for water fountains, 1.65 million to upgrade our CCTV, 250,000 to replace the Botwell Leisure Centre football pitch, 500,000 towards bowls club refurbishments, and 200,000 towards shopfront improvements. 10 years ago, we started the programme of updating or redeveloping all 17 of our libraries. Now, 10 years on, the first of those libraries are in need of refreshing again, and we will commence a £1 million per annum programme to do this. These and many more items will receive injections of cash to invest for the future of our residents, continuing to build on firm foundations. I haven't mentioned the museum, the Battle of Britain Bunker Visitor Centre, the new theatre, or the new park at St Andrews that will all move forward this year. The list really is so long and comprehensive. Madam Mayor, we are an administration in control of our situation, not a council floundering in a sea of debt and shortages. We have delivered, we are delivering, and we will deliver again in the year ahead. Madam Mayor, in addition to revenue and capital budget, there is also the housing revenue budget, which is central to the continuing significant housing stock we hold. Rental income in the forthcoming year is forecast to be just over 55 million, with the HRA balances standing at 36.4. The programme next year will include expenditure of 21 million on new stock, 6.2 million for shared ownership, and 11 million for much needed supported housing. Works to existing stock will account for just over 11 million. We have a robust housing revenue and capital budget in place, which has enabled us to invest in all the necessary upgrades to our stock over the last year and going forward, particularly in relation to our high-rise buildings, which we are improving following the Grenfell disaster. All in all, this is a very robust budget, placing this council in an excellent position to move forward to do what it has set out to do for many years, namely to put our residents first. We have worked extremely hard over many years to ensure that this council is on the soundest of financial footings, and this is proven once again with both the zero increase in council tax and the wide programme of support to our residents. Once again, I would like to express my gratitude to the hard work of the Director of Finance and his team in putting together this budget and for their financial control over the Council's activities throughout the year. And especially, again, my thanks to the leader without whom we would not be where we are today. Madam Mayor, outside this borough, the world is sometimes a confusing place, full of ups and downs, ins and outs, sometimes full of joiners and leavers. Inside the borough, all is calm and well ordered, everything is running smoothly and according to plan. I say to all our residents and to any non-residents listening or watching this tonight, for calm, well-presented and delivered services, clean parks and streets, smooth road surfaces, new pavements, modern libraries and leisure facilities, then you really only have one choice. Stay or move to Hillingdon without delay. Madam Mayor, in conclusion, if you want weekly refuse, recycling and green waste to continue, if you want a new free bulky goods collection service to start, if you want our schools building programme to continue, providing a proper place for every one of our children, if you want all our 17 libraries to remain open and to be refurbished, if you want a new leisure centre, a new museum, the Bunker Exhibition Centre, if you want the Chrysalis programme to remain, if you want to see the replacement of HOAC, if you want water fountains in your parks, if you want a commitment to recycle coffee cups, if you want more roads and pavements to be resurfaced, if you want more green flags to remain in this borough, Madam Mayor, you didn't expect me to make a speech and not mention green flags. All 48 of them, more incidentally than anywhere in the UK. I only just resisted bringing the map along to remind everyone. If you want to protect our green belts, if you want a new park at St Andrews, if you want so many more things that I haven't had time to mention, then there really is only one choice you can make. Only one way you can be certain of making this happen this year. One way of continuing to build on firm foundations, one way to ensure that this borough continues to deliver for its residents tonight, and for that matter after the 3rd of May this year. And that way is to vote for this Conservative administration now and in the future. Madam Mayor, I refer you to the Green Agenda and to the recommendations listed 1 to 16 on pages 4 to 6. I formally move these and recommend them to the Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bianco. Councillor Puddyford, that's seconded.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second and reserve my right.
Councillor Eginton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Similar to Councillor Bianco, I'd like to put a bit of context around our amendment. The amendment says that the Cabinet be invited to consider the Labour Group's amendments to the Cabinet's budget proposals set out in the Council tax resolution and report back to the Council. These amendments would result in the Council tax requirement of and the Council's share, which is the same as in the original motion. What has happened over the last 8 years is that there have been significant government cuts. There's been a risk to all local government, and in fact, local government has been in the front line of central government cuts. Arguably, national government has chosen to reduce local government's ability to both deal with the needs in our community and doing that supposedly without taking the flak for reduced services. The problem is that austerity has affected those most in need, and that affects particular areas within our borough. Fortunately, Hillingdon has seen dramatic increases in housing, generating more council tax, roughly 10% more. And with commercial developments, particularly hotels and distribution businesses based on Heathrow, there have been significant increases in business rates, of which we collect about a third of that increase. I would remind you that the Conservative Party were keen to get rid of Heathrow, but our belief on this side is that better, not bigger. Better, not bigger. We're not convinced about the sustainability of social care without significant change in the way in which it is financed nationally. However, we have take some assurance that the current budget will be sufficient for the coming year, but we will look again at this area in future. As to council tax rates, well, Hillingdon 10 years ago started with a much higher Band D council tax than other boroughs, Madam Mayor. And indeed, I have a nice table here which shows that of our neighbouring boroughs, we actually, if you were Band D taxpayer over the last 10 years, you would have actually paid more in real terms than any of the other boroughs, apart from Harrow, but that's been Tory at times as well. So you have to allow for that. The only ones which have been significantly higher, being Kingston upon Thames, Tory, Richmond upon Thames, Tory, Sutton, Liberal Democrat, Bexley, Tory. So overall, somebody living in Hillingdon in a Band D property would have paid £600 more in real terms than in Ealing over those 10 years, and £260 more than in Hounslow. I've got the figures, so if you want to check, fine. What we believe as the opposition is that after the election, when we are in power, we will have a cooperative council. We will work with all areas of our communities and stakeholders to create a better Hillingdon. And to do so, we have taken a few examples, not everything, but a few examples which are within the amendment. First of all is the police station. Now, I don't know whether you're aware, Madam Mayor, but the number of crimes actually reported at the front desk in Uxbridge Police Station is about 20 a week. The cost, I've got all night, I hope you have as well. Good. the cost, Madam Mayor, would therefore be about £500 per person. So it would actually be cheaper to arrange for a couple of taxis to be waiting there to collect anybody who wants to turn up in Uxbridge Town Centre and take them down to Hayes Police Station if they want to report them. So it's just to talk about financial sense. It's just not appropriate. So that's the reason why we don't believe that offering money to keep a police station open to deal with 20 people a week makes sense. There's also then the landlord licensing scheme. Now we all know that there's variable quality of private rented housing in all parts of the borough.
Eginton, could we listen quietly as the Labour listened to Councillor Bianco, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, there's variable quality of private rented housing in the borough. Much of the rent is paid from taxation, so notwithstanding the need to make certain that our constituents are properly housed, we have a duty to ensure that landlords act responsibly. And therefore, our proposal would be to introduce a licensing system for landlords to ensure that properties being occupied by our residents are of adequate quality. We're also proposing that ward budgets. It was actually mentioned, I believe, Madam Mayor, by Councillor Bianco, that ward budgets are such a good thing. Well, I don't think they've actually been topped up for quite some time. So our proposal would be that there would be another £10,000 per ward. Planning enforcement. Well, again, we're concerned that there are a number of uncontrolled developments, unregistered developments, and houses in multiple occupation which need to be properly monitored. And we're proposing another couple of people to be involved, a couple of officers to be involved in that. Until the new amenity centre is established in the south of the borough, our intention would be to have some additional officers who would be able to deal with collection, particularly of bulky items, but also trying to reduce the amount of fly tipping, which is just too prevalent at the moment. Then moving on, Madam Mayor, we have children's services. My colleague, Councillor Sweeting, will be talking in some detail about this, but in the last 2 years ago in the budget, there was a proposal that there would be some new young people's centres built. And of course, those have been cancelled. In fact, I believe that may even been a manifesto promise of the Conservative Party. Most of the young people's centres, I'm afraid to say, Madam Mayor, are hardly ever used. There are very few sessions. I know that in Charville there's none at all. And all of this is really disturbing. It's a problem in that unless there is opportunities for young people to spend their evenings in a safe environment, there's a risk that there will be problems about antisocial behaviour. Mention was made about early learning centres. Unfortunately, that had been paid for, the early learning centres have been paid for out of the school's budget, as was mentioned by Councillor Bianco. Back in 2014, the Schools Forum, which represents schools and school governors, asked the council if they would sort out the funding for the early learning centres. And 4 years on, it really hasn't been solved. So unfortunately, Schools Forum decided to withdraw their money. It actually cost a few £1 million to get to that stage. I'll move on. Highway and traffic management officers. What we are looking for is a significant increase in the 20 mile per hour speed limits in residential roads, with traffic calming and restriction of rat runs. This borough has fallen some way behind many others in addressing this particular issue. Then there's a homeless prevention officer. There's a legal requirement now to provide more support and a moral obligation on the council to help our residents avoid homelessness. Our medium-term plan would be to ensure that children are never placed in bed and breakfast. And then finally, I have the child burial charges. At the moment, the council doesn't charge for cremation of the remains of a child, but strangely, there are charges for the burial. And personally, I think perhaps that discriminates against some religions. So just to recap, there's really quite a number of important matters which my colleagues will talk about. It is important that some of these matters are addressed. All of the matters are addressed. And we have produced a balanced, measured and focused package of additional expenditure. It is by no means profligate, but it is directed at particular areas of need. There are particular matters which need to be resolved and which affect so many of our residents. This package is achieved without any increase in council tax, as I said at the beginning, and we can confirm that we will seek to avoid any such increases unless we identify specific needs in the future. I propose the amendment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Eginton. Have we a seconder?
It takes quite a long time, doesn't it, to get to this bit. Madam Mayor, Councillor Dennis has told me about one cut that should be made already. Unfortunately for me, that's my beard. Madam Mayor, they say a week... Madam Mayor, they say a week is a long time in politics. Well, it's been a year since we put forward a budget amendment. It was just narrowly lost, and just like the previous year, I'm sure this amendment could be accepted by the administration. Again, as I said last year, if in the unlikely event it is lost, I'm sure we will see a version of it over the coming year. While the Conservative government fights amongst themselves on the Brexit issue, and Theresa May begins to adopt or think about watered-down Labour manifesto pledges, I'm sure the students at Brunel know what I'm referring to. We, those in local government, cope with the ignorance of a Chancellor who refuses to listen to the cries of the population and fund council sufficiently. The odd elastoplast grant here and there is simply not enough. We have a government driving the many into poverty, and they are simply turning a blind eye to what that means for ordinary people. We've already heard about Ealing, Harrow, Hounslow are doing this and not doing that, but what the administration will not tell you are what the Tories are doing. Tory councils, increases in council taxes and cuts in services. Not here, but you referred to Ealing, Harrow, and I'm referring to those Tory ones that you don't refer to. Touche. South Bucks, £55 garden collection. Madam Mayor, my colleague has presented to you a budget amendment that will begin to address the issues where our residents are having real concerns. I'm sure everyone has read both the budget, our amendment, and will agree that it targets areas where there are real pressures and where the administration is losing its objective of sound financial management. The proposed police station simply does not stack financially. Councillor Eginton has already said, with less than 3 people visiting the Uxbridge police station a day, one cannot justify spending £5 million of not available money, but borrowed money, on the purchase of a station, a further £250,000 per annum, and then another £300,000 servicing the interest. That works out about £500 per visit, more expensive than a triage in A&E, but without any positive outcome. A static building does nothing to stop crime. As I've said before, residents will only visit once the crime has occurred. It's a reactive proposition, and we propose that we use the extra 250,000 for additional police officers. Bobbies on the beat is what we've grown up with. And however technology has changed over the years, nothing has come close to, or will ever, to having to police on the ground being visible. It's visibility, intelligence gathering by being local, and being on the ground that will prevent stabbings, prevent burglaries, prevent the delivery or adoption of our children into the drug culture. Our second amendment proposes to tackle the long-standing issue of rogue landlords taking advantage of the vulnerable. It's a subject both sides of the Chamber have broadly had agreement on, and an issue that's been highlighted throughout the country. With more and more councils recognising that action needs to be taken, I've lost where I am now. We would recommend 2 full-time posts to begin the groundwork into a scheme that will address the abuse of tenants who have to suffer paying high rents and in substandard accommodation. We know it exists. We know that rents are at an all-time high. So why would we not take action? We all, here in this chamber, also know that the investment into such a scheme will lead to a self-financing situation. To quote a learned member, it's a no-brainer. Would you rent a property where the landlord will not issue a gas certificate each year? Ask yourselves that if you're inclined to vote against this amendment. Ward budgets have long been vital for councillors to help their ward residents. This small amount of funds helps councillors target initiatives locally and forms a local bond between councillors and residents. Councillor Bianco has already mentioned it. The administration, I'm sure, will appoint at length that the money has been diverted away from the Leaders Initiative for the elderly. But unlike the current leader, we believe that councillors in their wards can find ways to support the needy and the elderly residents. I'm sure we know where our residents' needs are and they can be met. The group's amendments on ASBIT and the diversion of 100,000 from recycling initiatives are both linked. It's well documented through the borough, and in particular the South in particular has a problem with fly tipping. Whether this is an issue that has something to do with a recycling centre, it's debatable. In the short term, we simply cannot allow our residents to dump on street corners, outside homes or down back alleys. The cost, we know with hindsight, is simply too great. And once again, we need to educate that as a council, as a community, it's not on to dump mattresses, fridges, sofas, household rubbish, wherever you like. You will be prosecuted if caught, and we desperately need to enforce this. The targeted pilot schemes that operate in Townfield and Heathrow villages should be rolled out. And whilst they will clean up the environment, the ASBIT officers can implement and devise schemes to prevent, and they can enforce. 2 additional officers will also alleviate the pressure on an under-resourced team. We would also adopt an app which allows quick notification to officers of the precise location of fly tipping for collection. One would also hope that some of the money could also be challenged into the mind-boggling 6 to 8 week wait for mattresses or such to be collected from residents' homes. So whether they pay less, the waiting time is more. Much was made of the reorganisation of the children's centres last year, both in the budget and at council meetings, and we had numerous amounts of consultation. A targeted spend of 250,000 is what we're asking for, or proposing, and we would address what is now seen as a generic service. Correct the lack of provision that now exists in areas of multiple deprivation. The service has to be about early intervention and better outcomes. Ultimately, you spend less. The targeted spend would not obviously address the lack of experienced staff currently in the following a reorganisation, the lack of equipment, or the unappealing nature of the sites. If we can put money into libraries, we should be putting some money into there. In order to tackle the workload, we propose we add 2 officers within the housing benefit team. Much has been discussed again about the unnecessary delays which can lead to the council attempting to prosecute individuals. It's our belief that the pressure on officers is such that they're making decisions without delving deeper into the cases and it's resulting in worst case scenarios, with individuals in court or homeless. By alleviating some of the pressure on staff, we should see better results and effectively zero costs when one accounts for the time. The addition of one homeless prevention officer to alleviate pressure within the team, where we see an increase in the workload. One cannot argue, or should not argue, against an additional officer within a developed society. The benefit is well documented, and as a community we should be disgusted with ourselves that this is not only a third world problem, but a real first world issue. Workload seems to have been a phrase I've used many times in this speech, and it's never more evident within the highways team. With petitions for parking schemes taking a ridiculous amount of time to process or reach a conclusion, it's clear the rationalisation of the service doesn't always lead to efficiencies. Whilst one accepts the cuts have to be made, it's equally important to reflect upon them and address the need. We've opted for the addition of 2 more officers in this service area to ease the pressure, but also to investigate some 20-mile-per-hour zones for certain areas. The safety and the well-being of our residents is always a primary concern for all of our councillors. The abolishment of the barrel charges we've discussed in many budget amendments over the years, Madam Mayor, and will be one that needs no explanation. It's a small cost and one that, as caring and responsible council, we should have in our budget. Madam Mayor, these amendments may seem unnecessary to some, but they have all been debated at some point or another in POCs or at council. They are targeted towards making a difference to our residents. I've never been more certain of the council adopting our amendment. That is targeted towards making a difference, and at its very heart puts the concerns of our residents first. I'm very proud to second this amendment. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I may, just for clarification, we are now debating the proposed amendment, which has now been moved and seconded, contained on pages 7, 8 and 9, and we invite speakers for that. Sweeting.
Councillor Sweeting. Councillor Sweeting. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I speak in support of the amendment which would provide additional targeted funding to our children's centres. Over the past 4 years, this service has had to contend with swinging cuts, totalling some 25% of their budgets, and this £850,000 budget cut means that children's centres have had vital services removed, affecting vulnerable children the most. I have heard first-hand from residents what the reorganisation of children's centres has meant on the ground. The following words are not mine. They are from people with first-hand knowledge of what is actually going on. Here is a quick audit. All is not working to plan, as Councillor Bianco suggests. 1. During November and December, there was a decimation of services. 2. Decisions seem to be made on the hoof. 3. The 50% cut in family support officers means that vital work to provide early intervention has ceased. 4. Centres seem to be adopting a 9 to 4 timetable. 5. 90% of staff have moved to other centres and new staff have no understanding of our needs. 6. There seems to be a dumb-downing of services. 7. There is now a one-box-fits-all mentality. 8. We are being offered no after-school services. The reorganisation of children's centres has failed to adequately recognise that Hillingdon is a very diverse borough. That this was recognised in a recommendation from a recent council major review that, and I quote, consideration be given to targeting funds where need is greatest. This recommendation came from both sides of the political spectrum. However, has this recommendation funding model been approved? No, it hasn't. If this non-targeted approach delivered good results, it would be easier to understand. However, Hillingdon's results at Key Stage 2 in respect to our disadvantaged children is poor when compared to all other London boroughs. We came second from bottom with more than 50% not reaching the required standard. The amended budget will enable this council to deliver more services to those who need them most, Just one final statistic. Just 3% of children living in Ickenham are living in poverty, while West Drayton has 43%. Please support the amendment, which will put resources where need is greatest. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. Councillor Deere.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am in support of the amendment of an additional homelessness prevention officer. It was only a few weeks ago I found a rough sleeper outside my local supermarket. When I asked her about her situation, she said she had been evicted from her private rented accommodation. I asked if she'd gone to the council for help, and she shrugged her shoulders and said, "I went there, wasted my day and received no help." Does this sound like a council who's continuing to build on firm foundations? But this is a case of one in many. Since the Tories have come into power in 2010, homelessness has doubled. How can this be when we are one of the wealthiest countries in the world? Isn't it a national scandal when there have been reports of a poor man, a rough sleeper, dying literally on the doorstep of the House of Parliament? This isn't something that's randomly happened. This is because of the policies that have been chosen and implemented by this government. There's been $5 billion worth of cuts to housing benefit support since 2010, alongside 45% cut in funding for Supporting People programme, which funds homelessness services. Figures from the National Audit Office report that homelessness of all kinds has increased significantly over the last 7 years. There's been 60% rise in households living in temporary accommodation, including 120,540 children since 2010-11. Appalling, isn't it? Our most vulnerable people are being failed by this government. Rough sleeping is continuing to rise. So it's imperative that Council take our amendment into consideration and from the 11 million provide an extra funding for only one extra homelessness prevention officer. That's not a lot to ask for considering the immense pressure housing is under and will be in the future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, in the Labour Group, we understand the financial pressure we are under because of the regime of austerity that central government insists on pursuing. But we still can do more for our residents if they put the money where it is needed. Therefore, the budget amendment that we have proposed reflects a fair approach. Instead of spending 250,000 on keeping the Oxbridge police station open, the council could pay for 6 more police officers every year to deal with the crime in the borough. We have to understand it is the police officer who keep the crime at minimum, not the buildings. We need more police officers on the street, not more buildings. Otherwise, we might as well have a police station in each ward. So it is not sensible to prioritize building over officers' number at the time when central government is making such devastating cuts to the police. Madam Mayor, at the same time, I think the proposal to buy Oxford police station is based on political considerations. There are local elections around the corner in May, and they are under serious threat this time. When the same administration tried to buy the now closed West Drayton police station, the police and ex-Mayor Boris Johnson turned down their proposals. Knowing this, why this hue and cry over the Oxford police station when they know the outcome will be the same? Madam Mayor, we have proposed 2 enforcement officers because we are receiving more and more complaints from the residents about the fly tippings and other behavior that negatively impact on presentation of the community environment. We also believe that no parents should be shoulder financial burden if they suffer the worst and their child dies. There should be no difference whether the parents wish to hold cremation or burial service. Through these amendments, we are trying to retain some humanity at the time of deep cuts to the local service. Madam Mayor, I support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sampari. Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let's be very clear. We will be opposing this amendment. because in various parts it just doesn't make any sense. But it is interesting to now know the opposition's official policy in response to putting residents first. And that is we'll hire you a cab to take you from Uxbridge down to Hayes. So there's the solution. Uber Labour, all problems solved. Well, the reality is that they are missing the point absolutely about the importance of Uxbridge Police Station. It isn't just about being the counter. They haven't answered the question, what about those residents in parts of the borough who do want to go to a police station where it is easier to get, by using public transport, to get to Scotland Yard than it is to Hayes? They are missing the point about, without Uxbridge Police Station being in existence, day-to-day operational policing of local policing will take place in Hounslow. Are you really confident that the senior officer sitting in Hounslow knows the back streets of your wards? We're not. Do they not realise that part of the consequence of not having an Uxbridge police station is that 99 response control will be done from Acton? Are they really comfortable that a senior officer sitting in Acton police station knows the back streets of every part of Uxbridge, every part of Hillingdon, every part of Hayes and every part of Northwood? We don't. That's why we want, and that's why the public want us to fight and argue for an Uxbridge police station. And that is why we are doing it. That's why we're putting residents first, and you are just proving once again you're out of touch, you don't understand the detail, and you're quite pathetic, really. But it gets worse. It gets worse. And I say that again. I'm coming on to you, Councillor Dillon. I'm coming on to you. They want $250,000.
Councillor Dillon.
It is a pathetic argument. And I'll come on to Councillor Dillon, put out his misery. On ward budgets, he wants to increase it. Which ward has the largest outstanding ward budget? Councillor Dillon's. £19,000. So, I would say that he hasn't done his homework. And I would also say that in terms of the grant funding of $250,000 for more police officers, have they done the sums? Because it only would get you 3.8 police officers. Maybe the 0.8 goes in the 0.4 of the car that the London Mayor wants for planning purposes. But again, we as a local authority don't have the power to employ the police officers. We have to enter into an agreement with the Metropolitan Police, who have to do match funding. And by, have they done that sum? No, because MOPAC have just fixed its budget today, therefore we can't actually use the $250,000 that they want to free up. Haven't done the homework, haven't thought it through, pathetic attempt to try and move an amendment. They just do not know what they are doing.
Thank you.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. Point of order, Madam Mayor. I would expect an apology right now from Councillor Mills.
Yes.
It's unacceptable behaviour. And you're on YouTube.
Speak to the Madam Mayor also.
Madam Mayor, point of order, it refers to a breach of the law or council rules, and if you agree that that has happened, then you can take that up, but otherwise that will be for Councillor Mills to decide whether he wishes to make an apology.
I do think that there were one or two things that you said that perhaps you could apologise for.
Madam Mayor, if I've offended him, I apologise. The point I'm trying to make, as a group, we do not think it has been thought through, and we have quite a lot of respect, and we've helped each other out on ward issues, so if he is hurt by that, that wasn't intended personally, it is collectively to the Labour group. But I stand by a point, it is not an amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Mills. Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Mills is always balm for troubled waters. I have to say, listening to Councillor Dillon, I found him so measured and persuasive, he could almost have been a member of the Conservative group in much of what he said.
Will never happen.
But listening to what Councillor Eginton said, I did begin, Madam Mayor, to suspect that the Czech communist spy who wrote that speech on the back of a fag packet might have been a Conservative double agent. And to paraphrase Neil Kinnock, never did we expect to hear a Labour councillor, Madam Mayor, advocating the sending of taxis to closed police stations to convey victims of crime elsewhere. And of course, we shouldn't forget that police front counters are not just to report crime. If you've been in a car accident and you need to produce your driving licence, if you are someone on bail from the courts who needs to report on a daily basis, if you are handing in lost property, police front counters are vital services for you to access. So I think a lot of what has been said is entirely spurious. But let me refer specifically to some of the points around children's services that have been made. The first in reference to the reorganisation of our children's centres which has taken place. And we heard about the significant reduction in services that is alleged by Councillor Sweeting. Well, we said very clearly that one of our priorities was to engage more with the people, the most vulnerable people in the communities of Hillingdon, who were not able to access and were not accessing those centres in the past. And whilst I think it is too early to say this is a definite trend, there's been a marked increase in the take-up of these services by those targeted underrepresented groups, which suggests that something in the plan is working to make sure that the most vulnerable residents of our borough are accessing the support and the help from our services that they need. So what exactly does Councillor Sweeting want to spend her £250,000 on specifically? On that, the Labour Party thus far are silent. But perhaps more concerning is what the Labour amendment does not say. The school's budget always forms part of our considerations, and I read that there is a plan to stop some Tory cuts in education. 3.2% cut that is apparently taking place. Well, the only elected member in this chamber who sits on the school's funding decision-making body, of course, is Councillor Eginton from the Labour Group, and I'm sure he will have noticed the 3.2% increase in schools funding that was noted on page 126 of the Cabinet Schools Budget Report. If they believe there's a cut in schools funding as a consequence of decisions that Councillor Eginton was party to, tonight was their opportunity to move an amendment to it. They are completely silent. Madam Mayor, either in this campaign they are lying to the public, or in this campaign they cannot add up. Either way, it's not a good look from Hillingdon Labour.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I speak in support of the amendment. During 2016, the Children, Young People and Learning Services Committee of this Council conducted a major review on early intervention services, including children's centres, and the ways in which these services could be enhanced and improved. As part of this major review, visits were made by councillors to various children's centres in Hillingdon. When the issue of funding was broached by children's centre managers, it became clear that at centres in areas with higher levels of deprivation, services were under significant pressure, due in part to the universal funding approach adopted by this council. In one centre which has high levels of children living in poverty and where need for services is higher, they asked that funding be targeted so that where the need was greatest, then funds could follow. This issue was taken up in Recommendation 4 of the major review, and I quote, within existing resources, consideration be given on whether funding for children's centres should be dependent on local levels of need. However, just this month, when the committee was provided with an update on this review, we had the response that the universal funding approach would continue. Services will indeed be delivered based on local need, but, and it is a big but, this will not be a model that translates funding to levels of local need. In other words, we will find out where the need is greatest, but funding will not follow need. So there we have it. Even when the statistical evidence confirms that there are higher needs in some areas, targeted funding will not be used. This means that funding in some areas of highest need will not be sufficient to undertake vital work to support our most vulnerable children and their families. This is why there is a real fear that families in most need will be failed by this council. The proposed amendment would go a little way in meeting the needs of the most vulnerable, disadvantaged and youngest of the council's residents. Without it, there is a real danger of families falling through the net with possible disastrous consequences. The work in our children's centres is vital. Our children are our future, and every one of them is important. Please support the amendment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks for calling me. I want to speak in favour of the amendment, as you would expect, in particular the additional enforcement officer posts in the antisocial behaviour team. I know from many issues in my ward, and speaking to my colleagues in the group, that the number of incidents are on the rise, and the need to put more resources in is greater than ever, whether it's tackling the persistent fly tippers, so-called boy racers, tearing around the estates making residents' lives a mystery, or the general antisocial behaviour of some people who live in the borough who think they can just do as they like without facing the consequences. I believe that the decent local residents would expect us to address these issues as a matter of urgency. I'd also like the council to take a look at the out-of-hours teams. Quite a few of the incidents happen after the out-of-hours teams are finished. This has led to frustration and anger from local residents who are seeing antisocial behaviour acts taking place but finding out nothing can be done. It is something that needs addressing. Let's hope that the next Labour Council will do it. Please support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Bells. Councillor Morse.
I wanted to speak on a positive item, but unfortunately, after Councillor Mills's efforts, I hope to say something. We are desperately short of police, and the reason we are desperately short of police is because the previous London Mayor took plan to take £1 billion off the budget, and we cannot maintain police numbers without this option of actually selling capital. Now, today, a woman, I don't know what happened, she hit 3 cars outside my house, and I had to go out. I had to actually go there, and I say, I had to get out of the car and remove her, because she'd obviously possibly had a stroke or whatever. I then dialed 101, nothing. My wife then went on the internet trying to connect the police. So in the end, I had to make the decision. I put her in my house, and I went down to the police station, and I wasn't there. And it was incomprehensible to me, because I actually said to the person there, well, I've never had an accident. I've done 40 years driving, but I've never had an accident. I said, what's the procedure? And they were a bit vague about what the procedure is. But it's the sheer lack of police power that is actually causing this problem. So the point I wasn't going to go to, but the extra police on which we are coming from our motion is absolutely essential in the situation we're living in, because I know several people here who've had break-ins in the middle of the day. The crime is actually rising, and we are being subject to it. And I think the core problem was when you go right back to the original budget that was set by the previous mayor. And there's no easy way out of this issue. So that's the point. And another point I make, Councillor Mills said about the ward budgets. We, in our ward, have been trying to get some fencing done for 2 years. And I've gone through all the things, then one team transfers it to another team. And now we reached a point, and I said, who is actually got to press the button to say this is authorised? And it was actually the leader of the council. So we actually, because there's such fine controls of some of the budgets. So when my colleague, Councillor Dillon, is condemned like that, he's done his very best to get this money spent. But I think this is an example of how this council is right. It appears to be fine, but it is not. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. Councillor Puddifoot.
Madam Mayor, just before Councillor Puddifoot speaks, I'll just clarify this is not your unlimited speaking time, because this is speaking on the amendment.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Eginton. Your detachment from reality on the view of life in Hillingdon is certainly encouraging. And thank you for referring to the history of council tax. It is very easy to forget that under the last Labour administration, they put council tax up 12% in 1 year. To do the exercise you were referring to, you do have to refer to the settlement funding assessment. That is the amount that the government give per head of the population. I will do that exercise, and I'll give you the funds, the historically funds, but we have always received less. Looking at the first of the financial implications that buying Uxbridge Police Station, for the benefit of the Brunel students, and again the Labour group, let me explain how this would work. We buy the building for £5 million and lease it to the Metropolitan Police for £50,000 a year, 1%. At this time, we receive 0.42% on investments in the money market, which is $21,000 a year on an investment of $5 million. So a 1% rental return, providing an income of $50,000, gives us an extra $29,000 a year. On the purchase side, this will be paid in revenue terms at $330,000 for 15 years, rather like buying a house on a 15-year mortgage. What the Labour group don't seem to grasp is that the property appreciates in value. Since the year 2000, the value of commercial property has increased on average by 3.7% a year. On that basis, the building will be worth 8.6 million in 15 years' time, over 10 million in 20 years' time, which makes it a pretty sound investment all round. Madam Mayor, this amendment proposes to spend £677,000 of funding set aside for in-year contingency funding, effectively unforeseen circumstances. Whilst the Labour Group are correct in their assumption that we will deliver next year's budget as we do every year, and they no longer question our ability to do so, on the bookshelf in my office there is a mug which has printed on it, "I'm an accountant, not a magician." It is not possible when setting a budget to cover all possibilities and events. There could be legal judgments or effects of, say, a fire or a flood that would have a financial cost to this council. For example, the recent high winds caused damage to trees that cost £140,000 to clear. This is funded from the contingency fund. You simply do not spend it before the year starts. That would be a silly thing to do. Madam Mayor, this amendment was produced yesterday, and there is not enough business case detail provided for us to make expenditure decisions, and this very simplistic approach is just not acceptable. I would, for the avoidance of doubt, not accept a reduction in Recycling Initiative Fund or plans to reduce the use of plastics or non-recyclable coffee cups. We consider that important, and that's just going to be a difference between us and the Labour Group. Accordingly, we will not support the Labour amendment. However, as regards abolishing child burial charges for residents, which we do have some sympathy, I understand this was a National Labour Party initiative in 2016. This was raised last year when I indicated that it appeared to have fallen on deaf ears of some of our neighbouring Labour-controlled boroughs. I made the point that if the Hillingdon Labour Group could persuade their socialist, I will wind up, Madam Mayor, socialist colleagues to abolish burial charges, our policy of at least 10% cheaper would see us abolish ours. The current position is that Hounslow have now abolished those charges.
I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. We are going to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Paddiford. Councillor Nelson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, how can this council justify their support to subsidise the operation of Oxbridge Police Station, where only 2 or 3 people use on a daily basis? Yet this council closed so many of our youth services in this borough, and the ones that are in operation is being run at a minimal time. This has left our youth with nowhere to go and no socializing in their locality. Instead, our youth congregate around the town centres, on estates, or open spaces. This leads to antisocial behaviour happening around the borough, and yet still there is not enough antisocial behaviour officers to deal with the antisocial behaviour because their council have cut all community services to the bone. They will not back the fundings of extra police officers that is so badly needed in this borough. So how can you justify these cuts that our community so badly needed? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Money. Oh, sorry. Councillor Kerr, I do beg your pardon. Okay. Councillor Money.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise tonight to speak on and support the amendments to the budget proposal proposed by the Labour Group, as expected. The budget proposals given by the Labour Group will help alleviate issues that affect many residents in our borough. Our amendments have identified investments in core services that are most valued by our residents, issues residents face every day in their communities, such as dump mattresses, antisocial behaviour, delays in implementing highways and parking schemes, as well as housing and homelessness prevention concerns. The administration boasts that it has not raised council tax for another year, but this is clearly not the whole truth. Sadly, what we do know is that Hillingdon's lowest earners and disabled, who are amongst the most vulnerable residents in the borough, will for another year pay an increased council tax while at the same time struggling to heat their homes, and will be utilising food banks to feed their families. Previously, this was not the case. It is shameful and nothing to be proud of. Nationally, we are facing one of the biggest housing crises, and this is being echoed locally. All councillors in this chamber can agree about the overwhelming problems caused by this crisis and how it is impacting many residents and their families. The most recent statistics for the borough show that 28.2% of households are in privately rented accommodation as of 2014, whereas the 2011 stats show that it was 18%. Clearly a massive increase. Residents just cannot afford to buy. Increased demand in the rental sector has led to an extortionate rental rates, with 33% of private rented homes failing to meet the government's decent home standard. Shelter also report that 61% of renters have experienced problems such as damp, leaking roofs, electrical hazards and gas leaks. Rogue landlords can make renters' lives a misery by refusing to carry out simple repairs, harassing renters in their homes and evicting them if they complain. The Labour Group proposed to pilot a self-financing landlord licensing scheme ward by ward. This is to raise housing standards and will benefit many of our residents and possibly transform their lives. I hope that everyone in the chamber agrees with these proposals. This scheme, whereby landlords are required to register who is living at that property and provide details of simple things like tenancy agreements, safety certificates, a yearly gas check, really would be putting our residents first. The cost of the administration and resulting enforcement action would be met from their licence fee income. I would also like to go on and talk about the housing benefit officers, as well as the homeless prevention officers and the adult social care assessments. All three of these are proposed because there is such a strain on these services, and we can help with these officers. We can help in these service areas to relieve pressures on caseloads. Long delays in assessments are causing unnecessary delays when it comes to hospital delays or any kind of social care assessments. I am proud to support these amendments from the Labour Group, and I urge all councillors to do the same.
Thank you, Councillor Money. Councillor Curley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I speak in support of the Labour Group amendments. In particular, I'd like to focus on local policing proposals. It's worth noting that we only have this item in the budget because the government have cut over £1 billion from the Metropolitan Police budget. It's also worth remembering that the former Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, started a similar police station closure programme when he closed and sold West Drayton Police Station in around about 2013. But we are where we are, and as such we have to make the best use of the resources available. Therefore, our amendment to use the £250,000 a year for the next 5 years that the administration has put forward for the running costs of Uxbridge Police Station to fund 6 additional police officers, and that is with an agreement of match funding from the Met. We believe that this is a move that will actually contribute to the safety and security of our residents and is a much better use of local taxpayers' money rather than paying the utility bills of a large building on the corner of the High Street. We also don't believe that borrowing £5 million to purchase the police station is a sensible thing to do. So we would cut that from the capital budget, which would result in a revenue saving of £330,000 per annum from 2019-20. A practical solution for a police station police base in Uxbridge would be for part of this very building to be used. We already have a community safety team here and an antisocial behaviour team here, so why not co-locate a local police presence here too? Madam Mayor, we all know that Councillor Mills Senior has a burning ambition to stand under the blue lamp in Warwick Place, proclaiming "Evening all" to the passers-by in a scene reminiscent of Dixon of Dock Green. Well, not only has Dock Green now got a green flag, but we've learnt from that era, it's bobbies on the beat that protect residents, not borrowing £5 million to buy a building and then spend £250,000 a year on its utility bills. Madam Mayor, we have a range of other budget amendments that includes measures to tackle the ever-increasing case of modern-day Rachmanism by the introduction of a landlord register. We have also put money into initiatives to tackle the ever-increasing fly tipping, as well as the targeted funding for children's centres and social care assessment officers. I would urge all members of the Council to put the residents before their party interests and support the Labour Group's amendments to this budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Curling. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I speak in support of the Labour amendment. Last November, I put a motion to Council asking that the processing of housing benefits be examined as people returning to work were affected by delays in processing to the point of eviction. This motion was defeated as all Conservative councillors voted against it, sadly. I spoke then as an example of a resident who had returned to work but her income did not cover rent and living expenses, so she needed housing benefit support. She submitted a claim, but 8 months later, her housing benefit claim had still not been decided. She was in massive rent arrears, and her landlord was pursuing eviction through the court. Had she been evicted, she would have been classified as intentionally homeless because she could not pay her rent, when in fact she was entitled to housing benefit that would have prevented these arrears occurring if it had been processed within the 30-day period allowed. I accompanied this young woman to court on 2 occasions and entered into discussion with her landlord about her situation to try to prevent the eviction, which in the end, thankfully, was avoided. Her claim was decided as we were in court, and lo and behold, she was not in arrears at all. By this time, of course, the stress of the whole situation meant that she could not work, could not eat, could not sleep, and was consumed by fear of what would happen to her and her 3 children if she was evicted. What sort of message is this to send out to people wanting to return to work? If the government is castigating people for living on benefits, could they make rents a lot lower and more affordable, please, or put resources into processing housing benefit claims a lot quicker for those who need them? Helping people return to work should be a priority for us. It benefits the individual, the economy, and ultimately all of us as a community. Hillingdon should be sending out a message that we do support people who want to return to work. That is why the Labour group is proposing the amendment for 2 additional housing benefit officers to help process claims more quickly and remove the fear of possible rent arrears and eviction. The cost of these posts would soon be paid for in reduced emergency housing and bed and breakfast costs for evicted families. There may be additional training required for staff, but more officers will mean more claims processed. When I've been helping residents with housing benefit claims, I've been told by officers when an eviction is involved, we give it priority, which shows the amount of pressure staff are working under.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Perfect. Yeah. Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to pick up on the child burial charges that the leader was referring to. The current position is that Hounslow have now abolished charges for children's burials, with Ealing charging £805 and Harrow this year increasing their charge by 5% to £1,139. With 90% of the average being £583, our charge in Hillingdon is set at £497 for a child burial, and cremations are provided free of charge. This is, however, an issue which should not be political. It is a terrible tragedy to lose a child, as I know myself, and regardless of what they are doing in Harrow and Ealing, we should do what we can to help our residents at what is such a sad time. Accordingly, the leader will ask officers to provide a detailed report to Cabinet on this matter as part of the budget monitoring report for our March Cabinet meeting. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burrows.
Madam Mayor, I believe there are no other speakers.
No.
If that is the case, then Councillor Bianco, as the mover of the original motion, has the right reply, which he doesn't want, and then Councillor Eginton, as the mover of the amendment, has the final right of reply. So, Councillor Eginton.
Councillor Eginton, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's been quite an interesting debate. I'd like to correct a couple of points which were made. Councillor Simmons, Madam Mayor, talked about, questioned why we hadn't sought to change the school's budget. Well, If he we could try, but we wouldn't actually be able to succeed. So it's quite important to bear in mind that we can't do anything about schools funding, which is why it wasn't in our amendment.
I think, point of personal explanation, Madam Mayor, I think Councillor Eginton probably, if he does regard this as a priority, should be aware that as this is the supreme decision-making body, should he wish to move an amendment asking the Council to refer this to Cabinet, then the Cabinet would be required to consider it again. He's chosen not to do so. Clearly he prefers either to lie to the public or to disclaim the responsibility for the decisions that he personally took part of.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon, for clarifying that. Councillor Eginton.
Thank you very much for that. Madam Mayor, Councillor Mills talked about not having enough funding for 6 police officers. Well, in fact, he will recall that the proposals in the budget include not only £250,000 a year from this council, but also that was to be match funded by a similar amount from the police authority. So that's why it was 6 police constables. Overall, as I said earlier, it's 3.4 police officers based on our £250,000, and £250,000 was the match funding which the police would have to pay to keep the police station open. That was the arrangement. That was the proposal to the mayor. Anyway, be that as it may, the fact is that our proposals, I believe, are both measured and focused and address some of the more important problems within the council. I've got unlimited time, have I? Madam Mayor?
Unfortunately, you don't.
Unfortunately not.
You haven't.
I just noticed that we thought you had, but actually when it's the right of response, it's back to 3 minutes.
I know. Don't worry, I wasn't going to go on all night. You'll be pleased to hear, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Yes, can I therefore call on everybody to support my amendment? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Eginton.
Madam Mayor, we now move to the vote, and members will recall that it's now enshrined in legislation that every vote on the budget, be it the original motion or amendments, is a named vote. So we are voting on the proposed amendments as contained on pages 7, 8 and 9 of the Order of Business, if you would like to indicate if you are for those amendments, against or abstaining. Councillor Ahmad Walana. Councillor Allen. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Bianco. Councillor Birra. Councillor Bridges. Councillor Burles. Councillor Burrows. Councillor Chamdell. Councillor Chapman. Councillor G. Cooper. Councillor J. Cooper. Councillor Cawthorne. Councillor Crowe. Councillor Curling. Councillor Dan. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Deere. Councillor Dillon. Councillor Dott. Councillor Deduccio. Councillor Duncan. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Eginton. Councillor Garg. Councillor Gillam. Councillor Graham. Councillor Hagger. Councillor Hensley. Councillor Higgins. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Kaufman. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Catra. Councillor Lavery. Councillor Lewis. Councillor D. Mills. Councillor R. Mills. I seem to have a thing about Councillor Flynn tonight. Councillor Flynn. Thank you. Because I crossed your name out, that's why. Councillor Money. Councillor Morse. Councillor Nelson. Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Oswell. Councillor Palmer. Councillor Puddifoot. Councillor Riley. Councillor Sansapuri. Councillor Seaman Digby. Councillor Simmons. Councillor Singh. Councillor Stead. Councillor Sweeting. Councillor White. Councillor Yarrow. Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Against.
Madam Mayor.
Against.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That the motion is lost. We now return to the original motion as moved by Councillor Bianco, seconded by Councillor Puddifoot, on which we have no speakers at the moment. Councillor Lewis first.
Councillor Burrows.
And then Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm proud to stand and support the Conservative administration's budget, which has the following few highlights within my own portfolio. With our roads over the past 4 years, we've resurfaced 681, with over 10 million spent this year alone on our roads and pavements. And in the past 4 years, the top ward for resurfacing was actually West Drayton. With our refuse and recycling and green waste, this will continue to be collected weekly, free of charge.
Hear, hear.
Unlike other boroughs who have started to introduce charges for the collection of green waste, etc. We will also have no introduction of bins for your various recycling like other boroughs are starting to creep in. A new bulk waste collection for our residents will be started, where they can put out fridges, freezers, sofas, etc., mattresses, and it will be collected at a time that suits our residents. So unlike Labour's amendment, we'll be moving forward with recycling initiatives and not actually deferring or taking them away. We'll also see a new waste and recycling centre being built in the south of the borough, which I know is long overdue. However, our residents have wanted this. We will move forward, yet another initiative moved by this Conservative administration. Parking rates continue to be cheaper for Hillingdon residents. We also have, very close to my heart, retained the road safety budget. But to come back on the Labour comment of wanting more 20-mile-an-hour zones in Hillingdon, as we have less than any other borough, I want to remind them of my comment at the last council meeting. We've seen a reduction in accidents in Hillingdon of over 18%, as stated by TfL's commissioner. And no other borough can get close, and TfL wanted to know how we done it. And that is when we compare this to other boroughs who have 20-mile-an-hour zones all over the place. This is a budget that puts Hillingdon residents first. This is a budget that will deliver yet again the 10th year of no rise for over 65s to 12th year. So no cuts, just continued investment for our residents who come first, will continue to come first under the Conservatives. Yeah. I so support this budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burrows. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The way to improve the future is to learn and build on what came before. In Hillingdon, we take heritage seriously and maintain, open, and show our heritage sites well. Our residents learn of the past whilst enjoying themselves. It was Andrew Carnegie who famously said, "A library outranks any one thing a community can do to benefit its people." Our 17 libraries are fantastic community centres where all ages come to learn, interact, be informed, have fun, and sometimes simply go to as a safe, warm destination full of caring librarians. Yeah. 10 years ago, we started a full refurbishment of our libraries, and in this budget, there is £3 million to refurbish 16 of them, and the money to build a brand new one in Newsley. Each library is different, with a different mix of members, and each serves a vital role as a local cultural beacon. I could, but I won't talk about the neighbouring boroughs who have, without exception, cut opening hours and in many cases closed libraries. I could crow about how through strong financial management our libraries, music service and cultural offerings were called inspirational and a shining beacon by the Arts Council, but I guess that would be simply crass, so I won't. Next month we are opening a new visitors centre at the Battle of Britain bunker, and I know I'm biased being both a cabinet member and a RAF reservist, but it's amazing. Amazing because it's of world-class museum quality, not a local borough museum, and the same will be true of the new museum that's coming along and should open next year. Hillingdon offers a wide programme of cultural and heritage offerings that are well attended because they are interesting and relevant to our people. It's one of the areas that you can actually see the slogan of putting residents first in action. The more eagle-eyed of you will have seen that also included in the budget is £2.25 million for the leisure facilities refurbishment and £360,000 for our museum and archives service.
In times when there are cuts in local government budgets from central government, through sound financial management, this Conservative administration has been able to shape and control expenditure in order to make Hillingdon a really great place to live and work. Madam Mayor, through you, may I please congratulate the Leader and the Cabinet Member for Finance, Property and Business Services for producing, once again, a budget that really strengthens and supports the cultural and heritage offering to our residents. Madam Mayor, I'm delighted to commend this budget to Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for inviting me to speak in the Council's budget setting debates. Council budget setting is one of my favourite days of the year. It is up there with the beginning of spring and Christmas Eve. In fact, there are a lot of similarities between Christmas Day and budget setting day, though as I only have 3 minutes to speak, I'll let others speculate as to who is Father Christmas. So far, we've heard some big numbers and about some really impressive borough-wide initiatives. But I want to illustrate how this budget allows us to put residents first by mentioning a small amount and a small initiative. Loneliness is a growing problem, especially among our older community. 3/4 of older people in the UK are lonely. The charity Age UK believes that 200,000 over 65s will not have a conversation with friends or family this month. Just think about that. Such detachment from society is not just sad, it also leads to costly illnesses. Loneliness is a serious public health issue, and dealing with it takes the strain off the NHS and social care services. As more and more people live longer, it becomes ever more important that we do what we can to help older people live independent and active lives. In the middle of last year, I was contacted by a local resident who was concerned about all of this. He wanted to set up a club for over 65s to just simply bring people together and asked if the council could help. Because we have a sound budget, we're able to cover the cost of hiring out the stables at Eastcote House Garden once a month. I'm pleased to report that the group regularly attracts over 30 pensioners, they play board games, get in external speakers and organise trips. Now, this only costs £500 a year and helps under 50 residents. But I think it's important to mention this type of activity because actually it's happening in multiple places all over Hillingdon, as I'm sure you're aware, Madam Mayor, having visited many of these places during your year. Hillingdon's Older People's Plan to make sure that we can provide services that help to create better quality of life for our over 65 residents and give peace of mind to their families, many of whom have to be carers for these older residents. Having more green flag spaces means that all our residents can keep active by walking beautiful locations. Free burglar alarms and free telecare services allows the elderly to stay in their homes for longer. Freezing council tax means that they can spend more of their money on what makes them happy. Keeping open libraries gives them places to go to meet friends. Madam Mayor, all of this and more is why I'm proud to support the budget, and I'm proud that Hillingdon Conservatives always put Hillingdon residents first.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. Councillor Colfon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So wasn't I stood up in this chamber. Good to be back. Within my... I'll use up all my time. I'll try and be brief. Within my portfolio, Madam Mayor, the transformation of adult services in recent years has delivered substantial cost reductions and service improvements. And this, I think, has played a significant part in making this remarkably consistent budget-setting record possible in recent years. For example, the development of supported and extra care housing has been absolutely key to this, and this summer we'll see the opening of 148 high-quality units with an array of facilities at Rati Meadow and Park View. This housing offer improves quality of life and life expectancy and generates considerable cost savings compared with more formal care settings. And among other things, supported and extra care housing helps boost wider housing supply. And on that score, Hillingdon has consistently exceeded its London Plan targets, and in fact has outperformed our Labour neighbours, Harrow, Brent, Ealing and Hounslow, in its performance in recent years in this area. We are also continuing to innovate in developing and procuring new units for rent. This budget also includes set-up costs for the new housing development company, opening up a new route for housing delivery and providing a commercial delivery mechanism for developing new homes for rent and for sale. And of course there is a revised first-time buyers initiative reflecting changes in the housing market. Madam Mayor, I would like to place on record my thanks to the Officer team for their work in transforming services, delivering efficiencies in these key areas of services under the leadership of this administration. This is sound financial management delivering for our residents. I'm afraid to say, Madam Mayor, what a contrast with the threadbare prospectus of the party opposite, as they hope a combination of national issues, the good old magic money tree and the Buggins turn principle will obscure the paucity of their local offer as we head towards May. Madam Mayor, I commend the budget to Council.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. We seem to have gone on quite a long time, so I think perhaps it would be rather appropriate to have adjourned for a 5-minute comfort break.